And so with that, I'm going to transition over to our presentation, Leveraging Energy to Communities, Technical Assistance and Related Tools to Plan for Fleet Electrification. And so I've asked Zach to provide an introduction to our guests from the National Renewable Energy Lab and, of course, the World Resource Institute. So Zach, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Hey, everybody. I guess first I do want to quickly touch on just for the new people and the joining us today. We know that every organization, every city organization is at a different place with electrification. So, the things that we present today, they might not be appropriate for where you're at in the process, but we do encourage you to come back and see what other resources and tools we're going to be talking about as the year progresses, and then also check out the things that we've talked about in the past. As in last time, we talked about having EV ride and drive events as a tool for helping organizations try and get more used to what electric vehicles are like and things like that to help with the electrification journey. So with that, we always try and provide tools and means for organizations to make progress in electrification of their fleets. So we have Lacey and Lauren here from World Resources Institute and the National Renewable Energy Lab, respectively. And they've been kind enough to join us today to talk about a really amazing tool and program that they offer organizations with their electrification process. The city of Sedona has participated in this program on numerous occasions. I think we're in our third cohort. Every single time we join, we always come away with something that is extremely helpful for us. So the EV Ride and Drives events, that was actually a product of one of the cohorts that we joined. And then we just recently went through a cohort that pretty much helped everybody with doing telematics to planning your EV infrastructure to a lot of other things. So they do a different topic every year, but it's all related to electrification in some way, shape, or form. So with that, I'll just hand it off to Lacey and Lauren to dive into what type of resources they have available for you all.
Hi, can you all hear me? Did my slides share successfully?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Ann. We really appreciate you having us. I'm going to share a little bit about NREL's Energy to Communities program overall and some of the work that we've done to support public fleets and planning for fleet transitions and how you can still get technical assistance under this program. And then I'm going to hand it off to Lacey, and she'll talk specifically about one of our E2C cohorts on fleet electrification that Zach was referring to, and she'll get a little bit more into the weeds there, and I think that'll be really interesting for everyone on the call as well. So a little bit of background on me. My name is Lauren Reichelt. I'm a project manager at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Before I joined the lab, I actually, similar to Donna and Brenna, I was the director of the Clean Cities and Communities Coalition out of Hawaii, and then joined the lab about 4 years ago. And so now I get to support the transportation sector from the national, sort of at the national scale and from the national level, but supporting all of the local coalitions, doing all of the really important on the ground work. And one of the other things that I do at the lab is run the E2C Peer Learning Cohorts program. So that is why there's kind of like two threads here for me and why I really enjoy this work here. So E2C, Energy to Communities, provides support to communities on a broad set of topics in a variety of sectors. So the overarching goal of E2C is to give innovative, cross-cutting technical solutions to municipalities, tribes, utilities, and community-based organizations around the United States, with the goal of helping them identify and implement solutions across all of these here. So power, mobility, buildings, and grid. And there are 3 access points to the E2C program and to the technical assistance under the program. So there's peer learning cohorts, in-depth partnerships, sorry, out of order here, in-depth partnerships, peer learning cohorts, and expert match. In-depth partnerships are multi-year engagements where the national labs work with a local project team that has to include a local government, a utility, and a community-based organization. We only work with a handful of communities through in-depth partnerships because the support is really extensive and it includes modeling and analysis and really deep engagement over multiple years. Peer learning cohorts are sort of mid-level commitments. We launch 2 to 3 new cohorts every 6 months, and we support about 15 communities in a given cohort on a given cohort topic. So we work with that group of 15 communities over about half a year. In this group learning setting, we build their capacity to tackle that specific energy topic. And then expert match is the lightest touch technical assistance, and we accept applications for expert match on a rolling basis. You can apply and request support at any time. You can, yeah, and this is also eligible not just for local governments, just as a flag. It's also available for any not-for-profit entities, so community-based organizations as well as certain utilities. And then through expert match, you get 40 to 60 hours of one-on-one technical assistance. So this isn't group learning. This is really, what is the challenge you're facing? How can we give you what you need to move this forward in 40 to 60 hours of technical assistance from lab experts? This here is a map of all of the communities we've supported through E2C technical assistance so far. You can see that because of this broad scope and all of these different entry points, this multi-pronged approach, we can reach communities that have different capacities, different priorities, different socio-technical contexts. Like we can find a way to support almost any community who's coming to us with a request, and give them support that meets their needs. So, like I said before, first arm of the program, in-depth partnerships, we really enable this local team of utility, local government, and community-based organization to work with us over several years to explore and evaluate energy scenarios through modeling, analysis, and validation. The goal is to reduce your risk of implementation of these energy strategies throughout the local energy system. So really by showing through modeling and analysis what the outcomes will be so that you're not investing in infrastructure before some understanding of those outcomes. These teams, these in-depth partnership teams, are selected through a competitive RFP process, and participation means that they receive dedicated NREL staff, up to $500,000 to fund the team, the local team, and then support with facilitation and community engagement locally, and then of course the extensive technical assistance. We did complete the first cycle of in-depth selections in 2023. One example of an ongoing E2C in-depth partnership project related to transportation is the one that's being undertaken in Chicago by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, Commonwealth Edison, and Respiratory Health Association. So the goal being to refine tools and analyses to help them reach net zero transportation emissions by 2050. So these improved tools will help the region better understand opportunities and challenges from implementing low carbon transportation technologies, including passenger and freight travel electrification and energy efficient mobility options. And then really looking at these cross-sectoral interactions of all of that electrification and efficiency with the grid. So that's where that more complex modeling and analysis comes in. So the second offering under E2C is the peer learning cohorts. Like I said, we're convening multiple community entities from across the country to learn best practices and strategies from experts, to hear from practitioner panels and peer experiences, to learn from their insights and their lessons learned. And we help cohort participants really think through their pathways to implementation. So typically, these cohorts convene monthly for 2 hours over 6 months. And we've led 3 or 4 E2C cohorts on transportation energy topics since the program started 3 years ago. So we've had quite a few transportation topics come through the cohorts program. This is a map just of cohort participants. So we've gone through 6 cohort cycles, 17 cohorts. We've had over 200 entities participate in at least one cohort. These are the topics for those transportation cohorts. So charting a path to municipal fleet electrification is probably the most relevant to this group, but I did hear some folks who are really focused on infrastructure deployment. So there are probably some others as well here. But the fleet electrification cohort really helped muni fleets, muni and cooperative utility fleets, and other public entity fleets focus on how they're going to transition to zero emissions light and medium duty vehicles. Participants developed action plans, and they worked really closely with their local Clean Cities and Communities Coalition partner to take some of these group learnings and translate them into their local context and really make sure that they had actionable next steps that made sense for them locally. Lacey's going to spend a lot more time focusing on this and talking to you about that cohort shortly. We don't have any near-term plans to run these exact cohorts again, but we did create some really fantastic practical resources out of these, which are available beyond the cohort to help communities develop their own fleet plans. So we're working on publishing those now, and hopefully we'll have those published in the near future, and that can be something that could be a useful tool for communities beyond the 15 that, of course, participated in the cohort itself. If you want to learn more about peer learning cohorts, you can scan here and save that link from the QR code, or you can go to the website on the slide here, nrel.gov/E2C/cohorts. And I can drop that in the chat too later. All right, expert match is the last one I want to talk about here. E2C expert match connects community level organizations to national lab experts to help them answer their energy questions, prepare for energy related decisions in the near term. I really like expert match. I think it's the most accessible and like immediately impactful. You can request support from expert match at any time. They review applications on a rolling basis. It's a simple online form that allows the team to really just understand your request and figure out who the right experts are to connect you with. And they make that connection and you guys can go from there. So I highly encourage folks to consider expert match if they do have immediate needs or questions. This is the spread of expert match requests that have been undertaken since the program started. And then I have a couple of case studies here of specific expert match projects, so you can get an idea of the types of questions people ask, and then I'll hand it off to Lacey. So Pagosa Springs is a town in southern Colorado, a rural community that has limited resources, and they wanted clean energy and energy resilience. So they were looking specifically to start electrifying their town's fleet vehicles, but they weren't sure where to start. So they submitted a request to expert match. And Argonne National Lab was able to provide the town with decision criteria to evaluate EV replacements for their existing fleet vehicles. And that analysis also supported the development of their fleet electrification plan that they're drafting with support now from Drive Clean Colorado, which is their local Clean Cities Coalition. And the output of that, just to get an idea of what comes out of this. So the analysis was summarized in a slide deck with an overview of vehicle replacements for the vehicles in their fleet, and then evaluation of vehicle options based on life cycle emissions, features like size of the vehicle, four-wheel drive, for example, and cost. And that's something that the community can then go use to make progress locally, get buy-in, move the project along. And then a second example is Vernon County, Wisconsin, which requested support from expert match to help them outline their best approach for EV infrastructure rollout, including locations for level 2 and level 3 chargers. So this request actually came from a local nonprofit, not from the county themselves, but they wanted to support Vernon County in their planning efforts. So we connected them to experts at NREL, and they received guidance on strategic planning and siting for EV infrastructure. So they were able to move that EV infrastructure planning along. If you want to learn any everything else about Expert Match. If you want to explore other case studies, QR code here, link here. And then I'll leave this up for like 2 seconds in case you want to screenshot any of these websites. And other than that, I think I can wrap up and hand it off to Lacey.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. And definitely want to say, if you have a project you need support on, definitely check out that Expert Match. Especially, that is an amazing offering from NREL to be able to get that expertise kind of on demand. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully that's working now. So I'm Lacey Shaver. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm a director of U.S. City Clean Energy at the World Resources Institute. If you're not familiar with us, we're a global research institute. We like to say we're a think and do tank. We've got about 2,000 staff across the globe, and we really focus on environment, people, nature, climate. And we have been partnering with the National Renewable Energy Lab for the last few years on the E2C Cohorts program, which has been a really delightful experience to get to kind of combine some of our research with the wonderful expertise at the labs to support communities across the US. And so I'm excited to get to share a whole bunch of resources for fleet electrification with you here today. And I'm going to dive into it, because I have a lot of stuff and this will be a nice leave behind. So Lauren shared a little bit about the different peer learning cohorts that we've run. And last fall we led one of my favorites that we've done so far. And Zach was a great participant. And thank you so much, Zach, for bringing us here to share some of those lessons learned with a broader audience. So we had about 15 municipal and public entity fleets. And we brought them together with Clean Cities and Communities coalitions, like our friends at the Valley of the Sun, to learn about and plan for the transition to zero emissions light and medium duty vehicles. And so the whole purpose of this cohort was to be able to develop an action plan for fleet electrification. We ran through 6 different workshops, and the reason I put this slide in here is because each workshop had a bunch of suggested supplementary activities that could be really useful for others as they're starting to think about what are the steps for developing a fleet electrification plan. So we started really with that planning for fleet electrification kind of 101, which always needs to anchor on identifying your specific municipality's goals and timelines and starting with the data you have. Then moving into understanding vehicle and charging needs, building your team, working with your utility. Glad to see we have quite a few utility reps here. That's something we've talked a lot about, was the need to coordinate with your utility. And then actually moving into site assessments, working with your facilities team, doing financial analyses, and then bringing all of the pieces together with training, operations, and maintenance. So making sure that you're planning for necessary trainings with drivers, maintenance, first responders, everyone that you're going to need on board for successful fleet electrification. So I'm going to run through a bunch of different resources and kind of best practices that we heard for all of these different steps, in hopes that some of these will be helpful for you at whatever stage that you happen to be. So one thing that I always want to start with is that a successful EV fleet has a champion. And yes, that can be you. And if it's not you, go find somebody to be your champion. I think we really do see that as such an important role. And so every champion needs to be able to clearly develop that elevator pitch. We encourage folks to become the expert. Maybe you are not an EV expert yet, but attending conferences, reading up on products, tapping a lot of the resources like the Alternative Fuels Data Center, that can help get you up to speed. And then developing your plan. So thinking about a plan, I wanted to bring in this great example from Richmond, Virginia. They have a pretty advanced fleet electrification kind of plan and deployment at this point in time. And so when they were developing their RVA Green 2050 plan, they have a chapter on transportation and mobility and a strategy on municipal fleet electrification. And so all of their work really anchors off of having this in their plan. And they really clearly describe why it is really important for them to think about municipal fleet electrification. They have called out that fleet operations represent a considerable portion of the city's expenses and associated debt. And so investing in municipal fleet operations of the future now by starting to transition those vehicles to electric will yield reduced expenses in the future and overall life savings. So having that as their strategy then allows them to go out and start putting in place the different building blocks for moving towards electrification. And so this particular strategy enabled a clean and green fleet report, an EV action plan. They developed a fleet replacement policy, a joint EV transition committee, and then they've signed a charge at work program. And so this is all built off of that original RVA green plan. If you want to see a clean and green fleet report, I've dropped the link in here. It's a great example. They've taken that strategy and really built it out year by year, said what the actions are, what the associated costs might be, and started laying out that general process for installing EVSE. And this is really used to communicate across the government what the plan is and to make strategic decisions about how to invest and how to phase this so that it's not, we need to electrify the entire fleet next year, but here's how we're going to actually start phasing this in over time and how we're thinking about this in terms of cost and timing. So once you have your kind of goals and your timeline and everyone's on board for the why of fleet electrification, really start moving into, the next step is to start moving into identifying EV candidates. What are the vehicles that might be easiest to start electrifying? Generally, light duty is going to be a good starting point, with it getting more complicated as you move into medium, heavy duty, and off-road. That said, there are more and more options for all of these vehicles coming online. So there are options for, I think, just about all of them. I've done a lot of work on electric school buses, so happy to talk about that separately. But I think we've really seen the market expand quite dramatically in recent years. And definitely just want to say, when you're starting this process, it's so helpful to understand your operations, making sure you're talking to the fleet managers, operators, supervisors, and coming in recognizing that a vehicle is a tool with a job to do, right? So no matter what, even as you're electrifying, the vehicles need to be able to do those jobs. So understanding what the jobs the vehicles do is going to be really important. Creating an environment that brings forward champions is a great step to start thinking about that champion strategy, and then verifying assumptions with data. We heard throughout the cohort that a lot of folks, when people started talking about electrifying, they might have said, oh, well, I've got this vehicle and it's not a great fit, or I do all this driving. And then when you actually looked at the telematics, somebody might have a vehicle that they're using for lunch runs. And it's great that they have that, but they're really only using the vehicle for, 30 minutes a day. So having the data to really back up what those use cases are can help you make strategic decisions. And people don't always, the data might speak in ways that people don't always say out loud. So, or they don't even understand how they're using their vehicles. So there could be an opportunity to right size your fleet as well. There are lots of tools available for finding EV that might be suitable for different things. So I've included a lot of links throughout this. As you start thinking about replacement, there are a lot of different considerations you can bring in that you're going to use to shape your own decisions, and that strategy is going to be unique to your jurisdiction, but it's helpful to create a scoring criteria and prioritize in certain locations that you might want to start with electrification. You might want to look at highest utilization and cost to be able to achieve greater cost savings, but there are a variety of different factors. So laying out a replacement process with the criteria that makes sense for your jurisdiction will help make the decisions flow more smoothly for you. And do want to give this advice of not making the perfect the enemy of the good, especially when you're getting started. You can spend a lot of time on strategy, but a lot of folks said just starting with a subset of vehicles is a great starting point to get your feet wet and start understanding the technology. Mentioned it, data is key. I've got a list of all kinds of data that can go into your scoring criteria here, but you will want to be tapping from telematics data if you have it. Bringing in information about the vehicles, ownership, which department might own which vehicles, Are there acquisition costs or emergency special uses that you need to account for? Understanding usage data, tow capacity, dwell time, and then your cost data. Once you understand the vehicle side, you want to start moving into the EV charging side. And start assessing, do you need level 1, level 2, DC fast chargers, and how many? And so we spent a while talking about how do you identify your EVSE needs. And so we had a great presentation from some of our staff friends at NREL, and they recommended this process around grouping your vehicles by where they park, then determining the duration that the vehicle will need to charge. ZEV stands for Zero Emissions Vehicle, if you're not familiar with that acronym. Then identifying which type of EV charging is needed, and then determining a ratio for the project area of EVs to chargers, and then considering future proofing. This is an iterative process where you kind of go back and forth. I think a lot of folks assume that you need one charger per vehicle, but you might actually be able to get several chargers per vehicle, especially with a light duty fleet with vehicles that are not running really long routes, but that's going to kind of depend. But wherever you can maximize that EV charging, the number of EV chargers, that will save you costs. Time and time again, folks said that really starting from locations and figuring out which locations are going to be the easiest to access, have the highest frequency, or provide opportunities to reduce costs, because you're able to locate those chargers near existing electrical infrastructure to reduce trenching or other costs. That is a really great starting point if you're just getting going. In the early design phase, it's so important to connect all relevant parties early. So I was thrilled to hear that we have some facilities folks here today. So important. Don't want to pull them in late. You want to get your fleet managers on board, utility contacts, and your finance team. It can be great to get a lot of folks together and actually do a site walkthrough and talk through some of the specifics so that everyone is on the same page. And you want to start discussing things like utility programs. What type of charging stations are you looking for? Where might you put them? What are some of the anticipated charging patterns you might be thinking about? And then what are timelines? So bringing your utility in to talk about things like, do we have the space capacity on our panel? Are there going to need to be transformer upgrades? You want to know that as soon as possible, not after you've already ordered everything and it's arriving. Many considerations for charging station design that you'll want to get this team together and start thinking about. So parking availability, signage, lighting, ADA accessibility, etc. So also spent a lot of time talking about the role of utilities in EV deployment, and really your utility is going to be a partner in all aspects of your project. From service upgrades, they can help you with make-ready programs or ownership models, understanding the timelines, helping to identify incentives, and then helping you to really understand available rate structures in your bills and ways to minimize costs. So definitely you'd want to work with your utility to try to manage those costs and make sure that you're not charging and racking up peak demand charges, and instead are doing your charging in a way that is really smart. I've got a lot of questions in here that I'm not going to read through for what to ask and what to tell your utility, so they'll be in the leave behind. But when you're starting those conversations, you definitely want to ask your utility about EV incentives and rates, capacity for the planned project, and timelines. So those will mostly be in their court. You also, the fleet and the local government should come ready with information that will help the utility be able to answer those questions. So having done some of your vehicle planning and your EV charging station planning, having that data on hand, having drawings, that will make those conversations much more productive. There's a lot of best practices for controlling EV charging costs. As your deployments get more complex and you have more vehicles, you really do want to think about things like charge management, smart charging, thinking about what timing of day you're charging, thinking about how bringing many vehicles on might change your electrical load. So do you need to actually start pairing buildings or doing different kind of sub-metering to manage some of those costs. So we've got a lot of strategies in here and resources to help with that. So other stakeholders, a couple other stakeholders to mention are really fleet and operators. Bringing them into the process early, understanding what you're going to do in-house, what you won't do in-house, what will change with operations, I think will help build awareness and understanding. We like to remind folks that this can be an opportunity. It can be an opportunity for new training. And there's a lot of things that are the same. So I think sometimes people think everything's different, or, oh my gosh, I need to be an immediate expert in working on a high voltage battery, but in reality, your shiny new vehicle is probably going to be under warranty and they probably won't let you operate on the high voltage battery. So probably don't need to cross that one, as your first project, but trying to understand, what are some of the similar maintenance issues, what is the same about operations, and then trying to think about what might need to change from an operational standpoint to make sure the vehicles are charged when they're needed. And is that going to be the responsibility of the individual, or are you going to have people plug in and then the charger is going to automatically charge? You really do want to work with the fleet and the operators on all of these factors to make sure that the folks are trained and that the deployment, everyone is prepared and trained for deployment. I think this is my last slide here, which is around engaging first responders. And this is a great area to work with your Clean Cities and Communities Coalition. They can help you with basically all of these steps, but in particular, we heard through the cohort that a lot of coalitions are already engaging with first responders for different fleets and for different kinds of EVs. And they can help you coordinate with your local fire officials if needed. And so it's really important to let them know when you're changing your operations. You could consider taking a vehicle to the firehouse, showing them what your new vehicles look like, trying to take away any perceptions. And there are so many resources for first responders that you can take advantage of. So I have an entire appendix of resources that I'm not going to flip through, but just letting you know that they're here for even more tools and resources. But hopefully this gives you kind of a taste of what the process could look like and some lessons learned and tips that you can take back. And if you have questions, sure, myself and Lauren are happy to ask them now and later to help connect you with other resources to help you move forward in your fleet electrification goals.
Great. Thank you, Lauren and Lacey. Those are great presentations. A lot of information included therein. I have quite a few different questions myself, but we'll go ahead and get started with any questions from the group. And of course, Zach, feel free to jump in if you have some comments that you'd like to make. Also, I know Brenna and Don with Valley of the Sun Clean Cities Coalition certainly might have some great input based on their experiences too. So we'll open it up for questions at this point. And feel free to use your raise hand function too, as well. All right. Okay, well then I will go ahead and get started with a couple of questions. Certainly, Lauren and Lacey, with regards to, I think, our regional focus that we have here. We have, 33 plus communities in the Phoenix metro region specifically. Do you have any suggestions as far as coordination? Or do you provide support with regards to adjacent communities working together, certainly for fleet electrification?
I think it's great when folks who are going through this process can connect to each other. It's one of the values we see of this cohort, and learning from each other, being able to bounce information off of each other, or saying, hey, I did an RFP for chargers. Here's some of the information we got. We can kind of share some of our experiences with vendors or with procurement. I think in regards to EV charging in general, we talked a little bit about how we did community-wide EV charging. I think there's a lot of room for local governments to be updating their codes and permitting for streamlined installation of EV charging. And that is a great one to do regionally, so that when you have a provider that's coming in, there's not a bunch of confusing different zoning or permitting processes. And so if that can be done somewhat consistently, it can help draw and streamline things for investment into the area. So I think that's a great one to tackle as a region.
Thank you. Brenna and Don, I see you have your hand up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Lacey and Lauren. I can't thank you enough for doing such a great job on the presentation, but also we gained so much from participating in those cohorts with Zach and Sedona, and I can't recommend this enough to everyone in this group. It was terrific to be able to have that experience across the country with these different coalitions and different cohorts on the line with lots of experience. So, you know, I think that was the main takeaway. And like Zach said, one of the main things that they got out of that was a great connection through us for the Drive Electric Arizona group that helped them with some ride and drives that help facilitate experience, you know, butts in the seats, they like to say, with their fleet people, and also police, and who else was there? I mean, just about everybody from the city of Sedona was there on that ride and drive. So again, I wanted to thank both of you because I thought it was very well done, very well organized, and we learned a lot from that participation.
Thanks, Don. I'm gonna do the same thing for you all now, but what I will say is, you know, we don't have any transportation cohort topics coming up, and I know we're talking about a regional focus here, but I think Lacey did a great job explaining some of the opportunities for regional coordination, and then I think there is also a lot of opportunity to plug in with Valley of the Sun Clean Cities with Don and Brenna, and they are doing a lot of that regional. They have relationships across the region. They know who's working on what. They can help connect you with some of those examples, or, you know, facilitate a conversation with someone who might have already tackled something that you're starting to embark on. So definitely reach out to them if you're looking for, you know, the right person in the region. And Zach, I'm sure you all can help with that too. But yeah, definitely encourage that regional coordination. And then the coalition, the Clean Cities Coalition, Don and Brenna can also connect you with people across the country who've done some of those things. So there's a national network of coalitions that they're plugged into that can facilitate, they can facilitate conversations with folks across the country who've already tackled police vehicle electrification, for example, or, you know, whatever it might be, and make sure that you are learning from the lessons of others. So just wanted to say, like, with that, you know, in lieu of an E2C cohort upcoming on transportation, there's lots of other opportunities for that peer learning.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone else in the group at the moment? Because we're getting close on time, so we only have a couple more minutes. One thing I'd like to ask is if you see a change specifically when it comes to workforce development opportunities. You touched on the need to coordinate with like operational and maintenance professionals. Are you finding that those workforce, I guess, sectors are growing across the country as you're working through these different cohorts and groups?
I certainly think so. I mean, I think one of the big takeaways that we had on this project was that there was a real hunger for information on workforce programs. So some of the slides in the appendix, I have several that are just like, here are trainings for EV technicians, here are trainings for first responders, here are trainings for folks who are going to be installing EVSE. I think there needs to be, it could be a nice area for regional collaboration as well, to try to gather what is regionally available, or working with community colleges, working with your Clean Cities coalition, to figure out how you make sure that that ecosystem is available in the Phoenix metro area. I'm not aware off of the top of my head what all programs are available, but I would reckon that there's something somewhere, but they are expanding pretty dramatically, and the need for trained staff is just growing. I think there's a real shortage of trained EV technicians and installers. So I think it's just making sure folks are trained up for that scale.
Great, thank you. All right. I
And
was
that's
gonna
definitely
say-
been an important, sorry, Anna, but yeah, for a rural town like Sedona or any towns in northern Arizona, having people available to work on and address different issues with electric vehicles is important. Even though electric vehicles rarely have problems, when they do, it's really nice to have someone nearby. And at least for our case, we don't have to ship an EV all the way down to Phoenix and stuff like that. But
Yeah, that can be
yeah.
an expensive proposition. Great. Well, Lauren and Lacey, I want to thank you so much for the excellent presentation. As mentioned, we will make sure that everyone gets your slides as a follow-up, and we'll certainly encourage them to connect with you directly on those different options with NREL specifically, and of course, Valley of the Sun Clean Cities Coalition. I can include the information to Brenna and Dawn and VSCCC as well as a follow-up. So yeah, so to close out our meeting, just want to say thank you so much. We certainly encourage you to attend again in the future if you'd like to provide updates.